The door swung open. Kendra Washington stumbled into steam, expensive soap, and the coldest eyes she'd ever seen. Min Hosiak stood shirtless in the doorway, tattoos glistening, water dripping down his chest, and a look on his face that said she had 3 seconds to explain why she was still breathing. She just crashed into the private suite of a Korean mafia boss who hadn't touched a woman in 12 years, and she was about to become the reason he broke that vow. If you're ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, subscribe to Ebony and Pearl Stories right now and hit that notification bell. You don't want to miss what happens next. The hallway lights flickered overhead. Kendra Washington pushed her squeaky cleaning cart down the 11th floor corridor of the Hansa Grand Hotel, her arms trembling from exhaustion. She hadn't eaten in 24 hours. Her stomach had stopped growling sometime around midnight. It had given up just like everything else in her life seemed to be doing. She thought about her baby sister Amara, 7 years old, epileptic. The pharmacy had called yesterday to remind Kendra that Amara's medication had gone up again. 40,000 more, one per month. 40,001 she didn't have. Her supervisor's voice echoed in her skull like a curse. One more mistake, Washington, and you're gone. Kendra tightened her grip on the cart handle and kept moving. Suite 113. That was her assignment. A standard turnover. Fresh towels, new linens, restock the mini bar. Simple. She just needed to get through this shift without collapsing. The brass numbers on the door ahead glinted under the flickering lights. She squinted. The middle digit was burnt out, or maybe scratched off. It looked like 1103. It had to be guess. The door was slightly jammed. Kendra pushed her cart forward, and the front wheel caught on the uneven carpet. She shoved harder. The cart lurched, jerked, and then rolled fast, slamming into the door with a heavy thud. Kendra stumbled inside, catching herself on the cart handle. Steam poured from the bathroom. The scent of expensive soap filled the air. Sandalwood, cedar, something dark and masculine. The suite was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline. A king-sized bed sat untouched, but the bathroom door was wide open. And then he stepped out, shirtless, hair wet, water dripping down his neck and chest. Tattoos covered his torso. Black and gray ink that crawled up his ribs, wrapped around his shoulders, and disappeared down his arms like living shadows. His body was carved from discipline and violence. His jaw was sharp, his eyes sharper. He looked at her, and Kendra's entire body went cold. She had seen powerful men before. She had cleaned their rooms, folded their sheets, scrubbed their toilets. But this man was different. This man looked at her like he was deciding whether she would live or die. The silence stretched for 3 agonizing seconds. Then he spoke. What are you doing here? His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that came right before something violent. I'm so sorry, sir. I thought this was 1103. The number was burnt out. I didn't mean to. Her words died in her throat when 2 men burst through the door behind her. Security armed, hands already reaching for her. One of them grabbed her arm and yanked her backward. Sir, we've got her. Let her go. The guard froze. Sir, I said let her go. The words were ice. Absolute. The guard released her instantly, stepping back like he'd touched fire. Kendra's arm throbbed where his fingers had dug in, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The man, the one with the tattoos, the one whose suite she had just invaded, walked toward her slowly. His gaze swept over her face, her uniform, her trembling hands. He was reading her, cataloging her, every detail. Then he looked at his guards out. They didn't argue. They didn't hesitate. They simply turned and left, closing the door behind them. Now it was just the 2 of them. Kendra's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She gripped the handle of her cleaning cart like it could protect her, like it could save her from whatever was about to happen. I'll go, she whispered. I'll go right now. I'm sorry. I didn't know. She turned toward the door, but her legs buckled. The world tilted. Her vision blurred. She reached for the wall, but missed, and her knees hit the marble floor with a painful crack. She had pushed her body too far, and now it was shutting down. His voice came from above her. Closer now. She looked up and found him standing over her. Expression unreadable. I can't stay here, she managed. I have to finish my shift. It wasn't a request. Kendra's body obeyed before her mind could argue. She sank into the nearest chair, her legs shaking, her hands trembling in her lap. He walked to the phone and picked it up. He spoke in Korean fast, clipped, commanding. She didn't understand a word, but she understood the tone. This was a man who gave orders and expected them followed. When he hung up, he turned back to her. Room service will arrive in 10 minutes. I don't need. You haven't eaten. It wasn't a question. He had seen it. The way she stumbled, the way her hands shook, the way her cheekbones jutted out just a little too sharply. He had seen all of it. Kendra opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. 10 minutes later, a cart arrived. Steak, rice, soup, banchan, fresh fruit. Enough food for 2 people. The server set it on the table and disappeared without a word. The man sat across from her. He didn't touch the food. He just watched. Kendra's pride told her to refuse. Her pride told her to stand up, thank him, and leave with whatever dignity she had left. But her body was screaming. Her stomach was empty. Her sister needed her alive, so she ate. Slowly at first, then faster, then desperately. Soup, rice, meat, anything she could reach. She didn't look at him. The shame was too heavy. When she finally stopped, her plate was empty. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and forced herself to meet his eyes. He was still watching her, but something in his expression had shifted. The coldness was still there, but underneath it, just barely, there was something else. Something soft, something dangerous. Thank you, Kendra whispered. He didn't respond. She stood on unsteady legs, gripped her cart, and walked toward the door. Her hand was on the handle when his voice stopped her. What's your name? She turned. Kendra, she said. Kendra Washington. He didn't give his. She didn't ask. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, pulling her cart behind her. The door clicked shut, and she stood there for a long moment, heart still pounding, hands still trembling. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know what she had just walked into. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had just stepped into the life of someone she should have never looked at twice. Kendra is out here working double shifts, starving herself to keep her baby sister alive, and the world keeps pushing her down. If you believe that hardworking people deserve a chance, that struggling doesn't mean you deserve to suffer, then subscribe to Ebony and Pearl Stories right now. Only people who don't care about others scroll past without subscribing. Comment what time you're watching this and tell me, do you think Kendra should trust him or run? Because what happens next will change everything. The next morning, Kendra stood in front of her supervisor's desk, her stomach sinking. 11th floor. Suites 1101 through 1110. Full turnover. Martinez, please. I can take another floor. Any other floor. Her supervisor didn't look up from the clipboard. You're assigned to 11. That's final. But yesterday there was a misunderstanding, and I don't think the guest wants Washington. Martinez's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. You're already on thin ice. One more complaint. One more mistake, and you're done. Do you understand me? Kendra's throat tightened. She thought about Amara, the medication. The rent due in 6 days. Yes, ma'am. Get moving. Kendra grabbed her card and walked toward the service elevator. Her pulse already climbing. She told herself it would be fine. She would clean the other suites first. She would avoid 1108 or whatever that room actually was. She would keep her head down, finish her shift, and never think about the man with the tattoos again. The elevator doors opened on the 11th floor, and chaos erupted. Shouting somewhere down the corridor, angry, rapid Korean. Then a sound that made her blood freeze. Gunfire, 3 shots, 4, a scream, running footsteps pounding against marble, then a heavy thud from somewhere below like a body hitting the ground. Kendra's hands went numb on the cart handle. Her mind screamed at her to move, to run, to get back in the elevator, but her legs wouldn't obey. Then she saw him. Min Hosiak came around the corner at full speed, gun in hand, shirt half-buttoned, eyes blazing with something between fury and focus. He saw her Washington move. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, grabbed her wrist, and yanked her forward. Her cart crashed against the wall as he dragged her down the hallway, his grip iron tight, his pace relentless. What's happening? Quiet. He pulled her behind a marble pillar just as the hallway mirror exploded. Glass shattered across the floor, glittering like deadly rain. Kendra gasped, her back slamming against the pillar. And then he was there, pressed against her, shielding her with his body. His arm wrapped around her waist. His chest was flush against her back. She could feel the heat of him through her uniform. The hard muscle, The tension coiled in every inch of his frame. His breath was warm at her ear. Don't move. She couldn't have moved if she wanted to. Her body was frozen, caught between terror and something else. Something she didn't have time to name. More gunfire, more shouting, then footsteps retreating, growing distant, fading into silence. Minhosiak didn't release her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Kendra could hear his heartbeat. Fast, angry, alive. It pounded against her spine like a war drum. Then slowly he stepped back. Kendra turned to face him, her legs shaking, her chest heaving. What the hell was that? He didn't answer. His jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the corridor, his gun still raised. They saw you. The words hit her like ice water. He looked at her then, and the coldness in his expression made her stomach drop. Those men, they saw your face. His voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it. Something that sounded almost like fear. They know who you are now. They know you were with me. I wasn't with you. I was cleaning. It doesn't matter. He stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back. They will use you. They will come for you. They will take you to get to me. Kendra shook her head, her mind reeling. I'm nobody. I'm a cleaner. Why would anyone? Because I protected you. The words hung in the air between them. She remembered yesterday. The guards grabbing her. Him ordering them to let her go. Him feeding her. Him watching her with those unreadable eyes. He had shown her mercy, and now she was marked. Minhosiak pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke in Korean. Fast, sharp, commanding. She caught fragments she didn't understand, but she understood the tone. He was giving orders. He was moving pieces on a board she couldn't see. When he hung up, he looked at her again. You're not going back to your normal shifts. Excuse me. Your movements are restricted. You stay on this floor. You don't leave without my knowledge. You can't do that. And I am. Kendra's anger flared. Hot and desperate. I have a job. I have a sister who depends on me. I can't just your sister will be taken care of. That stopped her cold. What did you just say? Her medication, her school, whatever she needs. His expression didn't change. It's handled. Kendra's chest tightened. She didn't know whether to scream at him or collapse at his feet. This man, this stranger had just appended her entire life in less than 24 hours. She demanded, why are you doing this? He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his eyebrow, the tension in his jaw, the weight behind his eyes. Because you walked through the wrong door, he said. And now you're in my world. I don't want to be in your world. I know. I don't need your protection. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his gaze shifted. It wasn't soft. It wasn't kind, but it was something. You do, he said quietly. Because now you're mine to protect. Kendra opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. She was trapped. Not by walls, not by guards, by him. That night, Minhosiak didn't sleep. He stood at the window of his suite, staring out at Seoul's glittering skyline. But he wasn't seeing the city. He was seeing the past. He was seeing her. Sujin. 12 years ago. She had been everything to him. His calm in the chaos. His reason to come home. The only person in his world who looked at him and saw something other than a monster. They were supposed to leave together. He had planned it. A new life, a new city, far from the blood and the betrayal. He had trusted his second-in-command to handle the final details. He had trusted him with the location, the timing, the route. He had trusted him with her life. And that trust had killed her. The ambush came in a hotel hallway. Not this hotel, but one just like it. Same marble floors, same golden lighting, same expensive silence that shattered when the gunfire started. Minhosiak had been in the next room when he heard her scream. By the time he reached her, she was already on the ground, blood pooling beneath her, eyes wide, hands reaching for him. He held her. He begged her to stay. She died in his arms. And when he looked up, he saw his second-in-command walking away. The man he had called brother, the man who had sold him out for power. Minhosiak killed him 3 days later. But it didn't bring her back. Nothing did. So he made a vow. No woman would ever get close to him again. No woman would ever become a target because of him. He would live alone, rule alone, die alone. For 12 years, he kept that vow. And then Kendra Washington crashed through his door. Over the next few days, Minhosiak watched her. He told himself it was surveillance, protection, strategy. He told himself he was keeping her close because his enemies had seen her face, and he needed to know her movements. But that wasn't the whole truth. He watched her push her cleaning cart down the hallway, shoulders tight, jaw set. He watched her scrub floors and fold linens and empty trash bins without a single complaint. He noticed the tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking. Hunger she tried to hide. He noticed the worn saws of her shoes, the frayed hem of her uniform, the way she flinched whenever someone raised their voice. She carried weight. He could see it. Not just physical, but the kind of weight that came from loss, from guilt, from years of surviving alone. He recognized it because he carried the same thing. On the fourth day, he let her into his suite. Not by accident this time. She knocked. He opened the door. She stood there with fresh towels, eyes cautious, posture stiff. "Housekeeping," she said quietly. He stepped aside. She entered slowly like she was walking into a trap. Maybe she was. He wasn't sure anymore. He watched her place the towels in the bathroom, straighten the items on the counter, adjust the curtains. She moved efficiently, carefully, but her hands still trembled. "Tea," he said. She turned. "I'm offering you tea." She stared at him like he had spoken a different language. "I'm working." "You're shaking." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She sat at the small table near the window, and he poured 2 cups. He set one in front of her and kept the other for himself. He didn't sit across from her. He stood beside her, closer than he intended. She looked up at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty maybe, or awareness. He wasn't sure which was more dangerous. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" She hesitated kind. The word landed strangely in his chest. He didn't know how to answer, so he didn't. She reached for the napkin beside her cup, but it slipped off the table. She bent to grab it. He reached at the same time. Their fingers brushed. Minhosiak froze. It was nothing, a graze, a fraction of a second, but it hit him like a bullet. Heat shot up his arm, and something cracked open in his chest. Something he had sealed shut 12 years ago. He pulled his hand back like he'd touched fire. Kendra looked at him, startled by the sudden movement. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice came out harder than he meant. Colder. She stood, her expression shifting from confusion to something sharper. "I didn't ask to be here." The words hit him square in the chest. She was right. She hadn't asked for any of this. She hadn't asked to be dragged into his world, marked by his enemies, trapped under his protection. She was here because of him, because he had let her in when he should have let her go. And now he couldn't stop watching her, couldn't stop noticing her, couldn't stop wanting to be near her. He hated how true her words were. Kendra grabbed her cart and moved toward the door. She didn't look back. She didn't say goodbye. But just before she stepped into the hallway, she paused. "Whatever happened to you?" she said quietly. "It wasn't my fault." Then she was gone. Minhosiak stood alone in the silence of his suite, his hands still tingling where her skin had touched his. 12 years of discipline, of distance, of death, and one woman. One accidental collision was unraveling all of it. He clenched his fist and turned back to the window. Something between them had shifted, and it terrified him more than any enemy ever could. Minhosiak lost the woman he loved because someone he trusted betrayed him. Sujin died because of greed, jealousy, and cowardice. And now he spent 12 years punishing himself for it. If you're against traitors who destroy lives for their own gain, then subscribe to Ebony and Pearl Stories and hit that like button. Only backstabbers and snakes scroll past without engaging. Comment loyalty matters. If you believe trust should never be broken because the walls Minhosiak built are starting to crack, and what happens next will change both of them forever. The storage room was quiet, too quiet. Kendra stood alone among the shelves of fresh linens, folding towels and stacking them into neat piles. The fluorescent light above her flickered every few seconds, casting strange shadows across the concrete walls. She tried to focus on the work. Count the towels, fold the corners, stack them straight. But her mind kept drifting back to him. The brush of his fingers against hers. The way he had pulled away like she had burned him. The look in his eyes when he told her she shouldn't be there. She shook her head and grabbed another towel. She needed to stop thinking about Minhosiak. He wasn't her problem. He wasn't her concern. She was here to work, to get paid, to keep her sister alive. That was it. But even as she told herself that, she knew it wasn't true anymore. Something had shifted between them. Something dangerous. She heard the footsteps too late, heavy, fast, coming from behind her. Kendra spun around. But before she could scream, A cloth clamped over her mouth. Strong arms wrapped around her torso, yanking her backward. The smell hit her instantly. Chemical, sharp, suffocating. She fought. She kicked. She clawed. She bit down on the cloth and tried to scream through it, but the sound came out muffled weak. Her cleaning bottle fell from her hand and rolled across the floor, disappearing under a shelf. Stop fighting. A voice hissed in her ear. Male cold. You're coming with us. No. No. She thrashed harder, throwing her elbow back, connecting with something solid. The man grunted, and his grip loosened for a fraction of a second. Kendra twisted, trying to break free, but another pair of hands grabbed her legs. Two of them. There were two of them. They dragged her toward the service exit. Her heels scraping against the floor, her screams swallowed by the cloth. Tears streamed down her face. Her lungs burned. Her body was shutting down. The chemicals seeping into her bloodstream, pulling her under. This was it. This was how she died. And then the door exploded open. Min Hosiak came through it like a storm. No hesitation, no warning, just fury in motion. He moved faster than Kendra's drugged mind could track. 1 second, the men were dragging her toward the exit. The next, the first man was on the ground, his neck bent at an unnatural angle. Min Hosiak didn't stop. He spun, grabbed the second man by the throat, and slammed him into the wall so hard the concrete cracked. The man choked, clawing at Min Hosiak's hand. But it didn't matter. Min Hosiak's eyes were black, empty. The eyes of a man who had killed before and would kill again without blinking. He snapped the man's neck with one sharp twist. The body dropped. Silence. Kendra collapsed against the shelf, gasping for air, her entire body trembling. The cloth had fallen from her mouth, but her lungs still burned. Her vision was still blurred. She couldn't stop shaking. Then Min Hosiak was in front of her. He dropped to his knees, his hands hovering near her face like he was afraid to touch her. His chest was heaving. His jaw was tight, and his hands were trembling. Her name on his lips sounded different. Desperate. Look at me. She lifted her head, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he spoke, and his voice cracked in a way she had never heard before. I won't lose another woman in a hotel hallway. Not again. Kendra's breath caught. Another. He didn't answer, but she saw it in his eyes. The grief, the guilt, the weight of something that had been crushing him for years. She didn't know the details. She didn't know the name, but she knew the shape of that pain. She had carried it herself. Slowly, carefully, Min Hosiak reached out and touched her face. His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. His palms settled against her jaw, warm and solid and shaking. He was touching her. For the first time in 12 years, Min Hosiak was touching a woman, and it broke something inside both of them. Kendra's hand came up without thinking, covering his. She didn't know why. She didn't know what she was doing. But she held on, and he let her. For a long moment, they stayed like that, kneeling on the cold storage room floor, surrounded by death, holding on to each other like it was the only thing keeping them from falling apart. Then Min Hosiak stood. He pulled her to her feet, his arm around her waist, steadying her when her legs threatened to give out. You're staying with me now, he said. His voice was quiet, but there was no room for argument. I can't. You can, you will. He looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath stop. Where I can protect you. Kendra wanted to refuse. She wanted to tell him she didn't need him, didn't want him, didn't trust him, but she couldn't stop shaking. And when he guided her out of that storage room and into his suite, she didn't fight it. She couldn't because for the first time in her life, Kendra Washington didn't feel alone. And that terrified her more than the men who had tried to take her. Those men didn't see Kendra as a person. They saw her as a pawn, something to grab, to use, to throw away. If you're against cowards who prey on innocent people to settle their own vendettas, then subscribe to Ebony and Pearl Stories and hit that like button right now. Comment Kendra is not a pawn. If you believe no one should be used as leverage in someone else's war, word spread fast. By nightfall, every corner of Seoul's underworld knew. The boss has a weakness again. A cleaner, a nobody. His first touch in 12 years. Min Hosiak heard the whispers through his men. He saw the way they looked at him. Curious, cautious, calculating. He knew what they were thinking. He knew what his enemies were thinking. He had made himself vulnerable, and he hated it. That night, he destroyed his office, shattered the glass desk with his fists, put his chair through the window, stood in the wreckage with blood dripping from his knuckles, chest heaving, rage boiling through his veins. But rage wasn't the problem. Was fear. Kendra found him the next morning. She stood in the doorway of his destroyed office, eyes scanning the broken glass, the overturned furniture, the smears of blood on the floor. What happened? She stepped inside anyway. You don't know me, she said quietly. He turned to face her, jaw tight. I know you're in danger because of me. And that scares you. The question hung in the air between them. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, quietly, barely above a whisper, he said, yes. Over the next few days, everything changed. He trained her, taught her how to hold a knife, how to detect when someone was following her, how to fight back if grabbed from behind. He was demanding, relentless, precise, but never cruel. And somewhere between the lessons, they began to understand each other. She told him about her parents, how they died in a car accident when she was 19, how she raised Amara alone, how guilt still kept her up at night because she wasn't in the car with them. He didn't tell her about Sujin, not directly, but she saw it in the way he flinched when she moved too fast, the way he kept distance even when he didn't want to, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. They were both haunted. They both understood. One evening, in the dim light of his suite, Kendra asked the question she had been holding back for days. Why me? Min Hosiak's jaw clenched. A lie sat on his tongue. Easy, safe, protective. But when he looked at her standing there in the half-light with her guard down for the first time since he'd met her, he couldn't say it. I don't know, he said instead. It was still a lie because the truth was unbearable. She made him feel alive. She made him fight again. She made him afraid, not of death, but of losing something real. He stepped closer. No more wrong doors. From now on, you stay where I can see you. Her breath hitched. His voice dropped to something raw, something dangerous. Because if someone tries to take you again, I won't survive it. Kendra didn't move, didn't speak, but something in her eyes shifted. An understanding, a surrender, a choice. For the first time since his lover died, Min Hosiak hadn't just touched a woman. He had chosen her. And Kendra Washington realized she had stepped into something far more dangerous than bullets or blood. She had stepped into a mafia boss's heart. Min Hosiak's enemies think love is weakness. They think caring about someone makes you easy to destroy. If you believe that love takes strength, not cowardice, then subscribe to Ebony and Pearl's stories and hit that like button right now. Only cold-hearted people who don't understand real connection scroll past without engaging. Comment, love is strength. If you believe protecting someone you care about is the bravest thing a person can do because this story just reached the point of no return and what comes next will test everything they've built. 3 weeks passed in Min Hosiak's world, and Kendra learned to breathe in shadows. She learned the weight of silence, the language of glances, the way danger moved through marble hallways like smoke. She learned that power wasn't always loud. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it touched your face with trembling hands and called your name like a prayer it wasn't supposed to know. She learned that Min Hosiak watched her the way other men watched storms, with respect, with caution, with the understanding that some forces couldn't be controlled, only experienced. And she learned that love, real love, the kind that carved itself into your bones and refused to leave, was the most dangerous weapon of all, because it made you willing to die. But more terrifying, it made you willing to live. Every morning, he taught her something new. How to recognize a tail, how to disappear in a crowd, how to turn a hairpin into a weapon. His hands guided hers, patient and deadly, showing her pressure points that could drop a man twice her size. You're stronger than you think, he told her one afternoon, his fingers adjusting her grip on the knife. Strength isn't about size. It's about will. And you, Kendra Washington, have enough will to move mountains. She believed him when he said it, believed it in the way his eyes held hers, in the way he never looked at her like she was fragile, even when she felt like glass about to shatter. But strength, she was learning, came with a price. Every skill he taught her was a reminder of why she needed them. Every lesson was preparation for war. The enemy was closing in. She felt it in the way his men moved differently now, sharper, more alert. She heard it in the conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, in the phone calls taken behind closed doors. She saw it in the way Min Hosiak looked at her sometimes, like he was memorizing her face, like he was saying goodbye without words. One night, she found him standing by the window again, shoulders tight with tension. Soul's lights stretched endlessly below them, but his eyes were somewhere else, somewhere darker. "You're thinking about her again," Kendra said quietly. "Sujin." He didn't turn around, but she saw his reflection tense in the glass. "Every day," he admitted. "Every night. She was supposed to be safe. I promised her safety, and I gave her death instead." Kendra moved closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with something else. "Fear. It wasn't your fault," she said. "The betrayal. You couldn't have known." "I should have known," he replied, voice hollow. "It was my job to know. My job to protect what mattered most. And I failed." The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding. They both knew what it felt like to carry the weight of someone else's life, to feel responsible for tragedies beyond their control. "That's why you won't touch me," she said. "Not really. Not the way you want to. Because you're afraid I'll end up like her." He turned then, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Raw, desperate, honest. "I'm not afraid you'll end up like her," he whispered. "I'm afraid you already have." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge, like a confession, like a dare. Kendra felt her heart stutter, felt the careful walls she'd built around her feelings crack and crumble. She thought about Amara, about the medication that now arrived on time every month, about the private school enrollment papers that had appeared on her sister's desk like magic. She thought about the way Min Hosiak looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, hungry and terrified and hopeful all at once. She thought about the men in the storage room, about the way death had felt so close she could taste it, about how he'd appeared like an angel of vengeance to pull her back from the edge. "Then I guess," she said, stepping closer, close enough that her chest almost touched his, "we're both already dead. So what are we afraid of?" For a moment, neither of them moved. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Min Hosiak's control snapped like a wire pulled too tight. His hands found her waist, pulled her against him with a desperation that bordered on violence. His mouth crashed down on hers, not gentle, not careful, but starving, like a man who'd been denied water for 12 years finally allowed to drink. Kendra responded with equal hunger, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body arching against his as if she could disappear into him, as if they could become one person and share the weight of all their fears. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "This is dangerous," he said, but his hands didn't let go of her waist. "This could get you killed." "Everything gets you killed," she replied. "Living gets you killed. Breathing gets you killed. Loving gets you killed. At least this way, I get to choose how I die." His eyes searched her face, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that she didn't understand what she was choosing. But Kendra had never been more certain of anything in her life. She was choosing him. She was choosing danger and darkness and a love that could burn the world down. She was choosing to live, really live, for the first time since her parents died. "I love you," she said, and the words came out steady, sure, unafraid. "I love you, Min Hosiak, and I'm not going anywhere." The effect of her words on him was immediate and devastating. Something broke open in his chest, something he'd kept locked away for 12 years. He kissed her again, softer this time, worshipful, like she was something sacred he'd been given permission to touch. "I love you too," he whispered against her lips. "God help us both, I love you too." But love, they both knew, was just the beginning. Love was what made the war worth fighting. The real battle was yet to come. 2 days later, the enemy made their move. It started with silence. Too much silence. The kind of quiet that pressed against your eardrums like a physical weight. Kendra woke before dawn with the feeling that something was wrong, fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. The sweet felt different, the air thicker, charged with electricity that made her skin crawl. Min Hosiak wasn't in bed beside her. She found him in his office, surrounded by maps and photographs and phones that hadn't stopped ringing. His lieutenants clustered around his desk like iron filings drawn to a magnet, their faces grim, their voices low and urgent. "They're moving," one of them said, pointing to a series of red X's marked on a map of the city. 3 safe houses hit in the last hour. Clean sweeps, no survivors, no evidence left behind. It's coordinated. It's professional. It's them. Min Hosiok's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. How many men do we have left? Not enough, came the reply. They've been planning this for months. Maybe longer. We're outnumbered 3-1, and they know our positions, our protocols, our safe words. Someone's been feeding them information. The word hung in the air like a poison cloud. Traitor. Again. Just like 12 years ago. Just like Sujin. Kendra stepped into the room, and every head turned toward her. She saw the calculation in their eyes, the suspicion, the unspoken question, the new variable, the weakness. The woman who'd appeared just before everything started falling apart. Min Hosiok saw it too. His eyes went cold, deadly, protective. Out, he said to his men. All of you. Now. They filed out without argument, but Kendra could feel their eyes on her as they left. She could feel the doubt, the blame, the fear that she was the reason their world was burning. When they were alone, Min Hosiok moved to her, cupped her face in his hands. They think it's me, she said. They think I'm the leak. I know, he replied. And, are you? The question should have hurt. Should have felt like a betrayal, a slap across the face. Instead, Kendra felt something like relief. Because he was asking. Because even now, even when everything was falling apart, he was giving her a chance to tell the truth. No, she said simply. I'm not. I believe you, he said, and she could see that he meant it, could see the faith in his eyes like a candle flame flickering in the darkness. But they won't. My men won't trust you now, and I can't blame them. Sujin's betrayal came from inside too. Someone I trusted, someone I loved, someone who knew all our secrets. The pattern is too familiar. So what do we do? Kendra asked. We run, he said. Right now, we take what we can carry, and we disappear before they find us. Before they use you to destroy everything I've built. No, Kendra said, and her voice was steel wrapped in silk. We fight. Min Hosiok stared at her like she'd suggested they jump off the roof. Kendra, you don't understand. These aren't street thugs or desperate junkies. These are professionals. Killers. They have resources, connections, an army. We're outnumbered, outgunned, outmaneuvered. Running is the only smart option. Maybe, she said. But running means they win. Running means they get to keep hurting people, keep taking what isn't theirs, keep spreading fear like a disease. Running means Amara grows up in a world where monsters are allowed to roam free because good people were too scared to stop them. Her words hit him like physical blows. She saw the moment he understood, the moment he realized that she wasn't just talking about his enemies. She was talking about courage, about standing up, about choosing to fight even when the odds were impossible, even when survival meant compromise, even when love meant letting go. You could die, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. You could die, and it would be my fault. I could lose you the same way I lost her. Then don't lose me, Kendra replied, stepping into his arms. Don't lose me by pushing me away. Lose me by fighting beside me. Lose me by trusting me. Lose me by letting me choose my own fate instead of deciding it for me. For a moment, Min Hosiok wavered. For a moment, she could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Fear versus love. Control versus trust. The past versus the future. Then something shifted in his expression, something hard and determined and absolutely deadly. All right, he said. We fight. But we do it my way. We do it smart. We do it together. And if you die, Kendra Washington, I'm going to follow you into whatever comes next and spend eternity making you regret it. She smiled, the first real smile she'd managed in days. Promise. Promise, he said, and kissed her like it might be the last time. The war began at sunset. They came from all directions at once. Black vehicles sliding through Seoul's traffic like sharks through water. Professional. Coordinated. Merciless. But Min Hosiok had spent 12 years learning from his mistakes, and Kendra had spent 3 weeks learning from him. They were ready. The hotel became a fortress. Exits were sealed, elevators disabled, stairwells turned into kill zones. Min Hosiok's remaining men took positions on every floor, every corridor, every room that mattered. They had the high ground, the defensive advantage, and something their enemies didn't expect. They had a woman who'd spent her life being underestimated, who'd learned to fight dirty, who had everything to lose and nothing left to fear. The first wave hit the lobby like a tsunami. Gunfire erupted, loud as thunder, bright as lightning. Glass shattered, marble cracked, and the air filled with smoke and screaming and the metallic taste of blood. But they held. They held because Min Hosiak had taught his men to think like him, to move like shadows, to strike like serpents. They held because Kendra moved through the chaos like she was born for it, dropping attackers with techniques he drilled into her muscle memory, appearing where she was needed most, and disappearing before return fire could find her. They held because love, real love, the kind that burned like a star in your chest, made you capable of impossible things. The second wave was harder. The third was desperate. By the fourth, the attackers were throwing everything they had at the hotel, wave after wave of trained killers crashing against their defenses like water against stone. But stone, Kendra thought as she pressed her back against a bullet-riddled wall and checked her ammunition, could be worn down. Stone could break. They were running out of time, running out of bullets, running out of men. And then she heard it. The sound she'd been dreading since this started. Min Hosiak's voice, calling her name. Not urgent, not commanding, gentle, like he was saying goodbye. She found him 3 floors down, propped against a shattered window with blood seeping through his shirt. Too much blood, red spreading across white fabric like spilled wine on snow. His gun lay beside him, empty, useless. He was alone. His phone was in his hand. He's calling for extraction, she realized. He's calling for help, but not for himself. For her. Kendra, he said when he saw her, and his voice was rough, tired, relieved. There you are. I was afraid I wouldn't get to see you again. You're hurt, she said, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands automatically going to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to fix what was broken. It's bad, isn't it? It's bad, he admitted. But it's not over. There's a helicopter coming. Extraction point is the roof. You need to go. Now. What about you? She asked, though she already knew the answer from the way he looked at her, from the way his hand found hers and squeezed gently. Someone needs to hold them off, he said. Someone needs to make sure you get out alive. Someone needs to make sure this ends here. Tonight, with them defeated and you safe. I won't leave you, Kendra said, and her voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. I won't run while you die. I won't be the woman who gets saved while the man she loves sacrifices himself for her safety. That's not who I am. That's not who we are. I know, he said, smiling despite the pain, despite the blood, despite the sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway outside. I know exactly who you are, Kendra Washington. You're the woman who saved me. You're the woman who brought me back to life. You're the woman I love more than I've ever loved anything. And that's why you're going to go. Because loving someone means wanting them to live. It means being willing to die so they can have a future. It means choosing their happiness over your own. No, she said, gripping his hand tighter. It means fighting together. It means facing whatever comes next side by side. It means choosing to live together instead of die apart. The footsteps were getting closer. Voices in the hallway, sharp and urgent. They'd been found. Tom was running out. Live, Min Hosiak said, pressing something small and cold into her palm. A key. To what? She didn't know. Live, and remember that you were loved. Live, and know that loving you was the best thing I ever did. No, Kendra said again. But he was already pushing himself to his feet, already reaching for the spare gun he kept in an ankle holster, already moving between her and the door like a shield made of flesh and bone and stubborn, sacrificial love. The door exploded inward. Men poured through, weapons raised, death in their eyes. Min Hosiak opened fire. Kendra ran. She ran because he'd asked her to, because love sometimes meant honoring someone else's choice even when it tore your heart in half. She ran because staying would mean his sacrifice was meaningless, would mean watching him die for nothing. She ran because somewhere in Seoul, Amara was waiting for her, depending on her, needing her sister to come home. But mostly, she ran because she could hear the helicopter approaching, could hear salvation singing through the night air, and she knew that living, really living, was the only way to make his love mean something. She reached the roof as the helicopter touched down. Strong hands pulled her aboard, shouted words she couldn't hear over the roar of rotors and her own thundering heartbeat. Seoul fell away beneath them, beautiful and terrible and stained with blood. The hotel grew smaller, distant, until it was just another building in a sea of lights. She pressed her face to the window and watched it disappear, watched the place where Min Hosiak had chosen to make his final stand fade into the darkness. In her palm, the key he'd given her was warm from her body heat, solid and real and important in ways she couldn't yet understand. Later, she would learn it opened a safe deposit box. Later, she would discover bank accounts, property deeds, investments, an inheritance, a future, a way to build something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. Later, she would understand that he'd been planning this moment from the beginning, preparing for the possibility that love might not be enough to save them both, ensuring that if he couldn't protect her with his life, he could at least protect her with his death. But now, flying through the night toward an uncertain tomorrow, all she could do was hold the key and remember. Remember the way he'd looked at her the first time she'd crashed into his world, dangerous and curious and alive. Remember the way he'd touched her face in the storage room, gentle and desperate and shaking with 12 years of denied longing. Remember the way he'd kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was fire and he was freezing, like she was everything he'd never dared to hope for. Remember the way he'd said her name, Kendra Washington, like it was a prayer, a promise, a benediction. She would remember, and she would live. And someday, when the pain had softened into something bearable, when the grief had transformed into gratitude, when she could think of him without feeling like her chest was caving in, she would tell Amara about the man who'd loved them both enough to die for their future. She would tell her sister about courage and sacrifice and the kind of love that echoed through generations. She would tell her about Min Hosiak, who'd spent 12 years learning how to live again, and who'd spent his final moments making sure that lesson wasn't forgotten. The helicopter carried her into the dawn, into whatever came next, into a life built on love and loss, and the unshakable knowledge that some things, some people, some moments of perfect understanding were worth dying for, worth living for, worth remembering forever. 1 year later, Kendra stood in front of a modest building in Seoul, reading the brass plaque beside the entrance. The Min Hosiak Foundation for Vulnerable Youth, established in memory of a man who believed that everyone deserved a second chance, that love was stronger than fear, that protecting the innocent was the highest calling of all. Inside, children laughed and learned and played in safety. Inside, young people who might otherwise have fallen through society's cracks found hope, found guidance, found a future worth fighting for. Inside, his legacy lived on, not in violence or vengeance, but in the radical act of choosing compassion over cruelty, light over darkness, love over everything else that tried to tear the world apart. Kendra had built this place with his money, his connections, his name. But more than that, she'd built it with his love, his faith in her, his unwavering belief that she was strong enough to carry their dreams forward even when he couldn't be there to share them. Amara ran past her, chasing a friend across the courtyard, healthy and whole and beautiful. 15 now, old enough to understand what they'd lost, what they'd gained, why their lives had changed so drastically in the space of a single night. Old enough to understand that love, real love, sometimes looked like sacrifice, sometimes looked like letting go, sometimes looked like a man choosing to die so the women he loved could live. "Do you miss him?" Amara had asked her once, years ago, when the grief was still fresh and sharp enough to cut. "Every day," Kendra had answered. "Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment." "Good," Amara had said, wise beyond her years. "That means he was worth loving. That means what you had was real." The sun was setting over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Kendra touched the scar on her wrist, the one from that night in the storage room, the one that reminded her every day that she'd survived, that she'd chosen to live, that love was worth every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of terror and joy and desperate hope. Somewhere in the city, life continued. People fell in love, took risks, made choices that would echo through generations. People found each other in the darkness and decided, against all odds, against all reason, to be brave. Tonight, Kendra thought, I'll tell the children a story. I'll tell them about a Korean mafia boss who learned that the strongest thing in the world wasn't power or money or fear. I'll tell them about a hotel cleaner who discovered that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. I'll tell them about a love that burned bright enough to light up the darkness, strong enough to change everything, true enough to last forever. I'll tell them that sometimes the most important choice you can make is not whether to live or die, but how to love. And as the stars began to appear in the soul sky, as another day gave way to another night, as children settled in for sleep in beds they never had to worry about losing, Kendra Washington smiled. Because she had lived, because she had loved, because she had learned that some stories, the ones that matter most, never really end. They just change into new chapters, new hopes, new chances to choose love over fear. They just become the foundation on which everything else is built. They just become the legacy that makes all the pain, all the loss, all the sacrifice worthwhile. And that, she thought, was more than enough. That was everything. If this story reminded you that love is worth fighting for, that courage comes in many forms, and that the most powerful thing in the world is choosing hope over despair, hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that they are stronger than they know, braver than they believe, and more loved than they can imagine. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for believing in love that conquers all. Until next time, keep choosing courage. Keep choosing love. Keep choosing to live fully, fearlessly, and with your whole heart. Because that's what makes a life worth living. That's what makes a story worth telling. That's what makes love eternal.